Hi everyone, my name is Tiffany. Welcome back, or welcome if you've never been here before. Today I'm going to wrap up my May reading. So I want to preface this video out by saying in my wrap up videos, I don't cover the books that I talk about in reading vlogs. I think this month I only have one vlog up, which is the one that I did while I was in Maui, and I do plan to have another one up by the time that you watch this, but I really want to use these to just fill you in and update on everything else that I'm picking up, and I want to do them as I'm going along. So this will be in the same style as the last video. Housekeeping adjourned. Let's get into it. The first book I picked up was a continuation in my obsession with His Boy Next Door by R.J. Moray. This is season 2, as the author calls it, and the first book in season 2 is members only. If you don't know or haven't watched my last update video, this is an age gap, coming of age and into kink sort of story where Jack really serves as the dom, an entry point for Channing in terms of his sexuality and his own need for submission. Jack also serves as a bit of a savior to Channing. He's very sheltered and emotionally neglected, and in this book he really gets to start a new chapter because of Jack, and he's really challenged by his own insecurities of not being good enough. He really gets a good window into Jack's life. Also, he gets to peek at some different dom sub pairings, which is interesting. Members Only is a fitting title for this book, and I really like how in this one Jack just wants to ensure that Channing's checking in and using his voice. I love to see it. He's always going to be his perfect boy. And so I immediately went into the next book because of the title, Learning the Ropes, I believe it is. If you don't know, I'm obsessed with the depictions of shibari on the page. I love when the rope across the skin is described and how the body is contorted into literal art. So had to pick this up. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty much what the title says. Channing discovers that he likes to be bound. This also sort of shows Jack his need for restraint a little bit, and this is also the point at which Jack starts to realize that their connection is far more than carnal, and I loved to see it. Again, I'm going to continue to say with this series that each novella really reads like a chapter in their romance. I recommend that you start from the beginning. You're not going to know what's going on, and I also recommend the entire box set. The author calls each collection of novellas a season, and you're not going to get the full arc unless you read it in that way. Just, my recommendation. After that, I needed to get into formation when it came to the SJM along. If you don't know, Jen from the Book Refuge has organized the SJM along where we're reading all of her books in publication order and sort of gleaning for clues, trying to figure out how they could possibly be connected. It has been a lot of fun, and I am behind. So I picked up Crown of Midnight, and I will say, okay, I really enjoyed this a little bit more than the last one because we got more magic, more history as to how this magic could work, where it comes from, and a huge reveal that made me want to jump right into the air of fire, okay? And, we're still in the castle in this one, and there's a bit of romance, if you will, some trust issues that come with that. There's also a great loss where Selena is dealing with grief. I'll say that romance does kind of cause a rift in the trio that I saw that was sort of being established in the first book, but the reveals in this I really enjoyed, especially when in the end, and I thought it was an interesting choice of character to leave all of these secrets with, being that his loyalties have been well established up until this point. So I'm very excited to continue reading and to start clocking everything I'm learning about word marks, word keys, and gates with ACOTAR. I gotta pick that up soon too, because I'm gonna be on Crystal's channel for that live show, and I'm like ready to come at it with the theories. This has been so much fun having everyone's eyes on it, and just like, oh, I love it. I'm glad that she put this together. After that, I read, well, let me check my reading update. I read Burn by Callie Hart. This is the third in the series, and this one really did deliver on what I really needed, which was some more development on their emotional connection, because their chemistry, okay, is plate tectonic shifting in terms of the terrain in her life, okay? I mean, it's so good. It's heady and sexy. And So here, I'll say that they are in a bit of an espionage situation. They are infiltrating a human trafficking ring, and Zeth is playing both sides. The stakes are really high. Sloane is still in hopes of finding her sister that has been missing. And so I love how in this book they are really cornered to communicate. They cannot survive this situation without talking. She really challenges him to use his damn words. And that is something that he's not well versed in, being the, boogeyman enforcer that he is. Harboring information has kept him safe. And so I love how she's trying to guard her heart, thinking that this freaking frenzy that she has found herself in with Zeth couldn't possibly be something that he wants long term. And I like how they become more legible to each other. I love a certain submissive moment from Zeth that we get in this book, and also how she surprises him at every turn. The way that she's really able to assume this fake role to keep them alive. And I'll say because of that fake identity type situation that we're dealing with, the putting on of the mask and the taking it off of it, I really liked the grounding moments that are centered in family. There's a very creative way as to how their families are merged, and I like that he gets more insight into Sloane, and how he settles into that with her parents pretty nicely. I thought that was touching. I love what's happening with this series. It's the third of 6, and it definitely feels like the midpoint in terms of reveals and surprises. So I will be continuing on with that. Let's see. The next book that I picked up, I try to be cool and remember, but oh yes, how can I forget? Because it's the last book that I freaking read, because the Rake Appreciation Society is in 2 hours. Okay, I am fresh off the audiobook with this one. This is about a Marquess that poses as a footman. He has been cheated out of land, and so he is determined to figure out how and set it right. And so he poses in the home of the cartographer who's responsible. What he does not know is that Rose is the true map maker behind her husband's successful business. And it is their romance. I love how the Marquess, Brandon, he's half Arab. So I love the social commentary that is centered around that in this book. Also, how he becomes privy to the plight of servants, okay? A relationship that he forms with a little boy in this book, it's so sweet. Also how, as he's trying to ferret out clues and investigate, she's trying to conceal them, and in that, he really affirms her talent and her beauty, which I'll say the former her husband exploits and takes credit for, and the latter, he's never really made her feel. She is starving for passion and for children in this very stern and stifling marriage. And I love how Brandon just allows her to feel seen. I love how she starts craving the ability to take ownership for her work, and how she's introduced to another female character that is adjacent to Brandon because she's successful in her trade. I like that she's able to be affirmed by her, and she's also an inspiration. I will say, the reveals on her Rolling Stone ass husband were a lot for me, okay? The amount of control that she relinquished to him and the way in which he treated her was really, really sad for me to read. And I really enjoyed this. I will say in the third act, I was kind of annoyed because there is a beat that is repeated, which is that the secrets that they are each harboring inevitably have to come out. But the way that it's done, by way of other characters, really bothered me. And it was like noticeable that that was being used as a device to cause conflict when I believe their secrets were conflict enough. In fact, you know, Brandon's planning on telling her everything and he's called away for good reason. And, you know, this is revealed. She's upset about it. I really wish she would have just like processed a little bit and realized that this is something that he was going to tell her, realize like why he couldn't at the time. That was kind of annoying that she kind of was angry for so long. However, the rug was pulled from underneath her in terms of what she believed her life was. And so I can understand her still being in that energy. What I didn't get is why that beat was repeated and her secret, again, was then revealed by another character. So I was kind of annoyed by that. Like I could see that in the seams, but I ultimately rated this a 4. I can't wait to discuss it in book club because her husband was a mess. A mess. Anyway, I will leave it at that. I need to change and head out for work. And like I said, I'm excited about book club. I will be back with more thoughts. I'm back with Immoral by Maggie Cole. I was very excited about this. In the first book, where I believe they should have gotten the title of Toxic because Gianni and Kara were just that. He's very protective of her. Going into this book, I already knew that they had a relationship back in high school that was pretty tumultuous and Kara got a clean break from. I knew going in that she was tired of Gianni meddling with her love life. And in this book, I got to see why. Because the man that she is seeing is not only Gianni's rival and enemy, he's a part of the flesh trade and pure evil. And at the beginning of this book, he turns on her and puts her up for auction. And of course, Gianni comes to her rescue, but he also uses the opportunity to sort of corner her and finally claim her by forcing her to marry him as a means of protection. And he knows that she's going to be pissed in the beginning, but he expects her to finally be forced to admit the truth that he has, which is that they belong together. And this is a quagmire for Kara's heart because she was really played with by him in terms of her feelings. I mean, he strung her along for years. She finally got a clean freaking snip, and the last thing she wants to do is be tethered to him. And so she really doesn't trust his help in the situation. There is mention of her believing that he may have known that this was going to happen so he could orchestrate this. And I really enjoy reading about a couple with history. I loved reading about them learning how to communicate with each other. The reveals on how deep their relationship was, and also just them falling into each other once again. Of course, this delivered on the steam, but that's really what Kara fears. And so I liked that there's some trepidation there. Again, I liked that they had to figure out how to communicate with each other. And I just really enjoyed this. I rated it a 4.5. Then I picked up The Never King by Nikki St. Crowe. I wanted to start tackling my Kindle Unlimited TBR, and this one really intrigued me because I have an obsession with Peter Pan. I love a retelling. I will say out the gate, I rated this a 3. And after getting past a bit of confusion in terms of the world building and the glacial pace at which things were revealed, I can say I do like how the retelling elements were used. I thought it was really creative. I enjoyed the lore and the sort of story around the lineage of the Darling daughters and how they're being taken captive at the age of 18, what's going on with Neverland and Peter and the Lost Boys quest. The quest, you know, in this was really compelling, excuse me. I enjoyed all of those elements, except for the romance. So at this point, I'm gonna throw up a little spoiler tag because I don't think I can dive into why without going into detail. So if you don't want to know anything, come back after this is gone. But I will say that I could care less about all but one of the heroes in this book. And before I get into that, I feel like it's important for me to say a little something about Winnie, because her backstory and like characterization really authorized the choices that she was making, at least for me. I understood where she was coming from. You know, it's established that she was raised by a single and mentally ill mother, made to raise herself under the freaking ticking time clock and guillotine of the age of 18, where all darling women lose their freaking minds. And her only sort of mentor or woman that she looked up to was one that commodified her femininity and that worked for her. I mean, Biggie Smalls said it best: to the honeys making money, playing fellas like dummies. Okay, that is what she idolized. And so it made sense to me, especially being that the story opens with her using her body to get what she needs. It makes sense to me that she would take that route in this very cryptic captor-captive situation with these 4 mythical alpha men that mean to break her for their own gain. I understood her need or plan to use her body to sort of dismantle their camaraderie, get them wrapped around her finger, and, you know, maybe chase her pleasure along the way. Like, I understood that. Doesn't mean that I had to like her choice of hero, because none of them at all ever spoke about anything other than her body and their POV. I mean, everything was in relation to them being horny, and everything was derivative of her being a hole to just be filled. And I did not find that sexy. I just thought it was smut for smut's sake. I kept waiting for a moment where they would even like at least do something, okay, to help her in this situation. And I just cringed at her sort of caricature and nymphomaniac need to be owned by them when they weren't deserving, because all they were taking ownership of was her body. And that never works for me unless I am privy to the fact that the hero is bewitched by her being and not just her body. And oh, it just bothered me. It reminded me of what I don't like in a lot of MC romances, where they talk about women in such a crass and crude way. They're demeaning and treat them as a pawn and things to use and discard. And that's exactly what I saw here. I didn't see anything different in terms of Winnie other than her being characterized as not like other captives, because she's not terrorized by her captivity and she's DTF. It read like freaking frat boys that were excited to have a taste of what was forbidden, and it bothered me. There was one hero that I wanted her to be with, and he's the only one that's not passing her around, and he's still a demeaning freaking dick to her. But he's the only one that showed concern about her well-being. He's the only one who was concerned about her emotions and what she thought of the arrangement that Peter set up, where he takes her off the shelf while he's allowed to play. Okay. And he's the only one that demonstrates some restraint out of fear of crushing her with his darkness and his weariness of being party to or witnessing the breaking of young women. And that was more compelling to me. I also think there's a line of dialogue from the Dark One. I'm just going to say it since we're in the spoiler section. There's a line of dialogue that he has that I think was the most honest line in the entire first book. And it is when he rejects her sexually and he says, "I don't want a broken fuck toy." Harsh, I know, but so honest. Because that is not sexy. It's like she plainly stated it for me. That would have been empty and meaningless if he gave in, and she knew not the freaking lap she was jumping into. And so I felt Like a steamy scene between them would have been just that. This is just smut for smut's sake. The difference between me is that, for me, is that like the sexual mechanics, the graphic language somehow simmers because there is chemistry and connection beyond what's carnal. And so I really wanted that between her and the Dark One. I was hopeful that the POVs of Peter and the twins would get into formation. And like I said, I really enjoyed the story. So I picked up the next one. And the Dark One I did like more. I did see a change in Peter in terms of being willing to bend for Winnie, willing to take her input in terms of the mystery, and willing to take some orders. So that was nice. But the bond within this reverse harem is strictly sexual. I didn't see it as anything but that. I also got what I wanted in terms of the Dark One and her. And there was a moment where I did see, sorry, someone's texting me, of course, because I'm filming. Wow. My phone's usually dry. Yeah, that's Instagram. Anyway, I did have a moment where I did believe or understand why the reverse harem worked. There was a scene that I could like lean into, and I really think that's because of something that Winnie says about how the Dark One and her relate, in them being broken and being too afraid to be vulnerable enough to say that with words. So they do it through pain, blood, and sex. That made sense to me. That made sense as to why smut was being prioritized over like a well-needed conversation, and smut was being prioritized over much needed like world building and just like some plot. Like, can we figure out what's going on here? So I also rated the second one a 3. I'm gonna be reading the third. I'm just not enjoying the freaking romance, and yet I couldn't stop reading. I mean, I don't have an explanation for that. I'm really eager to like actually swoon, so I'm probably gonna start my reading vlog where I'm gonna pick up some anticipated releases. Actually, that should be up on my channel by the time you see this, so I'm gonna get into that and I'll be back with whatever I pick up after. So I finished That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf. These titles are crazy, by Kimberly Lemming. This is such a fun freaking fantasy world, and I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed because there's so many creatures, from like dragons to freaking werewolves. They call them demons. This is a world filled with magic, and humans are very much aware of it. And I love how, thus far, none of the heroines are checking for love, okay? In fact, romance is disrupting their entire program, and they like reluctantly fall for these mystical, possessive alpha heroes. And this one just did not disappoint. This starts out with Bree really dodging a bullet by way of unwanted advances, okay? And so she throws a drink that is given to her that's been drugged by a love potion, and when it lands on freaking Felix, he turns, sees her, and the mating bond is freaking triggered. And he's instantly gone for her, and she's convinced it's because of the love potion. And he's just so sweet and swoony in a very stalkerish and endearing way. And I love Bree because she is a paranormal romance loving reader. However, she's also a cynic when it comes to romance actually being possible in her own life. And I just loved reading him woo her and pursue her and try to convince her that it is the fact that they are fated and not the love potion, because she is really dealing with abandonment issues. She's unsure of herself in terms of self-doubt and insecurity, okay? And her fear is that once the potion wears off, as she's falling for him, he will just leave like everyone else. I also like how in all of her books, there's really great social commentary. There's an interesting way that consent is discussed in relation to this love potion, and I really enjoyed that. Her writing is just so freaking consumable. It's comedic, okay? She delivers on this theme. It's always an adventure. And this one was no exception. I loved the entire cast of characters. One of my favorite being a freaking sword that talks named Alexis, okay? If she was in corporeal form, she would be showing these heroines how it's done. She is so clever and crass in a comedic way. Every time she was on the page, I was screaming. She's absolutely hilarious. I love her so much. I wish she was real. That's a character I'd want to have dinner with or just spend the day with. I swear, I wish she was real. But I really liked this book more than the last in terms of the quest. It didn't overshadow the romance, and in terms of how the romance really bumps up against Bree's insecurities. I just thought he was so freaking swoony. I mean, he even reads her romance novels for tips, and he's just so focused on taking care of all of her needs, and he's a bit traditional, which is good for a character like her that has a very unconventional family dynamic that doesn't really feed her. So I really enjoyed this, okay? I rated it a 4.5. Then I picked up The Bride Goes Rogue by Joanna Shupe. I'm not sure how I'm gonna hold this, so we'll just try to do this, and if my arm gets tired, so be it. But this was a lot steamier than I was expecting it to be, and I just love reading the modernity in Gilded Age New York. I find it so exciting. I liked that the hero Preston is a real estate tycoon, how he's trying to build the first skyscraper, and he's really imagining or envisioning what like a future New York would look like. He's been tasked with, well, in the past, with saving the family business due to some poor decisions made by his father. And another one of those poor decisions, at least from Preston's perspective in the beginning of this book, is the fact that his father arranged for him to marry his best friend and then business partner's daughter, Catherine. And this is something that Preston has ignored. He sees it as an archaic practice, and her father is like his sworn enemy, a man that he very much hates and really blames for some things that have to do with his father and the situation and how hard it was for him to kind of like step into the man that he is today. And so at the beginning of this book, although Preston has been ignoring this arrangement for marriage, Catherine has been waiting a year since her debut for them to be wed. And she confronts him at the beginning of this book with wedding plans where he swiftly shuts her down and calls out the lunacy in her believing that he would even follow through, which was humiliating and soul crushing for her, being that she wasted a year waiting. And so she vows to finally live her damn life. I love to hear it. And Preston sort of doubles down on his quest to find a no strings attached mistress, which leads them both to a French masquerade ball where I just loved reading about, you know, it's just like the pulse and the freed inhibitions and the costumes and the festivities of it all. And it's also where they are free to do away with their identities, which leads to a chance encounter, okay? A hot freaking interlude between them that underscores the remainder of their romance. And I loved reading them giving into the freaking passion between like each other that they have with each other. For Preston, despite like his vendetta against her father, and how Catherine is so like willing and open to explore with him. She has many firsts, okay? One of which is in a carriage, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading that. But I think what was most satisfying for me to read was her being forced to grow up a little bit. There's a nice side plot that kind of happens with her father that I enjoyed reading, and also her having to realize who Preston is and who Preston always said he was. I really felt like that needed to happen for her, and as well as him letting go of a lot. I will say, in terms of Joanna Shupe, you know, with her Uptown Girl series, I had an issue with the third acts in that series. And so I was a little nervous about this one. I will say there is a central argument that I do think is circled around and lingered on for far too long. But my overall enjoyment of this really eclipsed my need to like nitpick. So I did rate this 5 stars. Like, I really enjoyed this. I loved seeing her friends and just the art that was in this, the speakeasy, the supper club that was in this from, you know, the last book. I just enjoyed it so much. I had so much fun reading it. So I'm gonna keep my 5-star rating. Next, I know that I need to get to it with the SJM along. I have ACOTAR to read, and I might even try to squeeze another book in from my Kindle Unlimited TBR, so I will be back. Okay, so I was able to squeak out a couple more reads to finish out this month, and in the nick of time. It is 4 a.m. on the 31st. And I finished my reread of A Court of Thorns and Roses. Along with the physical copy, I listened to the graphic audio, which was just epic. I mean, the sound design in that, the ambient noises, the full cast, the music, the voices for the creatures. I absolutely loved this. And this reread was so much fun. I definitely felt different about the first part of the book. The first time reading, I felt like it had pacing issues, and it could have been the graphic audio, but I just didn't feel that this time around. I was reminded of how much I love Farah as a character and as to why. Just her being the sole provider for her poverty-stricken family. I fully bought her hate of Faye and the kill that sparks this entire story. And I really appreciated being shown why she's badass as opposed to being told. And I was instantly drawn towards her, rooting for her. I found her to be incredibly endearing. Whereas in the Throne of Glass series, it's taking me a couple beats with Selena. I'll just call her that, okay? And I was also kind of reminded of how, you know, Sarah likes to pack it into the third act, okay? All of the answers and the action and what I wanted to see was there. I appreciated how Farah is just a freaking survivor. She's so adaptable, willing to MacGyver anything that she needs to get the job done. And really, after she crosses the wall, that's in terms of information. She's willing to be wrong and course correct, and I really enjoyed that about her character. She changes her mind about Tamlin in light of how he's treating her. She is in a cage, but it is gilded, and it was fun to sort of read him knowing what happens, you know, next. Also, her willingness to accept help from wherever it comes from in light of what happens next. And this was just a delightful reread. I loved clocking elements from the Throne of Glass series that were definitely in this. It's gonna be fun to discuss that tonight because part of the joy of this is trying to see how they're all connected. So having everybody's eyeballs and theories as to how that could be has been like a bright spot for me. I love that Jen organized and put this whole like read along together. So I'm enjoying this. The audio, the graphic audio, you gotta try it. I cannot wait for Echo Bath. And then I was able to freaking squeeze in Tide by Carian Crowe. This was on my Kindle Unlimited TBR. I'm trying to chip away at that, and I am so happy that I did because this was a 5-star read for me. I found this to be such a beautiful story and a well deserved, or I think it's more proper for me to say, like, I think that this was like a fitting slow burn is what I'm trying to say. Tyler is a scarred hero inside and out. He is a lonely recluse who's harboring a lot of trauma and a lot of guilt. And in the beginning of this book, he rescues a teenager that he finds trapped in a hole in the freaking woods, and he kills her kidnapper. Holly was kidnapped at the age of 5, and she endured 11 years of horror and abuse until Tyler comes along and becomes her literal Prince Charming. And I love that she calls him that, because during her captivity, she escaped through her fairy tales. And oh gosh, now that she's been rescued, I think it's minimal for me to say that it's been an adjustment. I mean, her feeling like an interloper in her own family, her dealing with the PTSD of everything that happened, and also sort of being a celebrity because everybody knows what happened and keeps bringing it up. And oh, I just loved how rough Tyler is on the outside, and he's definitely emotionally guarded, but when it comes to Holly, he is so kind and gentle and patient and in utter awe that this woman is looking at him without cringing, that she's not jumping at the rasp of his unused voice. This is such a beautiful romance. I loved the longing that he has for her and the fear of that boiling over and almost pushing her too far too fast. That was a great cocktail in terms of tension, and I just loved it so freaking much, how they were able to bond through trauma and just the anxiety and arduous task of peopling. Society and the people in it, like, just really failed them, but I just felt like they were meant to be. This was just so freaking beautiful. I can't believe it took me this long to pick up. And again, it was 5 stars. I will leave it at that. And I also want to mention, I did pick up The Joker by Sophie Lark. This is a novella, and I got it through her Patreon, so I'm not going to really talk about it that much. I will say that this follows Ozzy and Che. They are characters from her Kingmaker series. I will say that this novella does like seamlessly integrate with that and like the information that we're told within that series, and she packs a lot of emotion and passion into a short amount of pages. So I'm loving her Patreon. I am really hoping for a few other stories. I won't get into that, but I want to go over my stats, if you will. Technically this month I have read, let's check the count, 46 books. I will say going forward, because His Boy Next Door has become an obsession of mine, going forward, I'm gonna call or count the next season of that series as 1 book. So on Goodreads as of now, I'm counting it as 46 books. And I'm not trying to say that like each novella isn't a book. I just feel like it inflates my count a little bit. And so from here on out, if I continue the entire like season 2 in the month of June, I'm just gonna count it as 1 book. Let's see. I read 5 physical books this month, 5 audiobooks I listened to, and 36 were ebooks, which is pretty like on brand for me. I read a ton of ebooks, and I suspect this ratio will remain the same because I just figured out how to get Alexa to read to me. Okay, I'm gonna be in the freaking game in June. Oh my God. I'm so ready for that because I'm still juggling running this channel and getting to all the books that I want to like read. That's been, you know, a little bit of a skill that I've gleefully taken on. Thank you for watching and being here. I'm so happy that I started my channel. In terms of stars, okay, I had 11 5 stars this month, 25 4-star reads, and 10 3 stars. I will definitely be coming out with a part 2 of my favorites of the year so far, just so that I can keep track. And also because a lot of my favorites aren't necessarily every book that I gave 5 stars to. So I need to keep track of that while they're fresh in my mind. But I want to thank you for joining me. Please consider subscribing and sticking around, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.